Okay, let's go to page 5 there. Let's go to 215, and I realize we didn't have a lot of time to get through a lot of this, but let's go over this and then I'll go over it again. Okay, so does anybody have what began in Europe just after Washington was inaugurated? Sarah. French Revolution. How did the French Revolution divide the United States? Go ahead.
The Federalists opposed France and the Republicans supported them.
Yes. And say it again. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, like, the Republicans supported their efforts for the revolution.
Yes. Now, that was important to point out. At first, the revolution was supported, but later on, things got very sloppy, obviously, over in France. Okay. And then the Republican support did actually start to decline. But at first, the Federalists opposed any revolution. Hamilton's not in favor of revolting against the government. Okay. Washington's not in favor. The Republicans did support it until really, what was that time period in the French Revolution when things got really sloppy? Go ahead. Yeah, until the Reign of Terror. Why was Washington in a difficult position? Go ahead.
Because if he defended France, then Britain would attack him.
Yes. Remember, this is as much a war between France and Britain also. Now, you heard this story last year. Does that sound familiar? Britain gets involved. Britain is France's biggest enemy by far. Battle of Trafalgar, Lord Nelson, Napoleon. Does that all sound familiar? Okay. Obviously, it's a little early for Napoleon yet, but he's coming. During the Revolutionary War, does anybody know where the heir apparent, who was Louis XVIII, actually came to seek refuge during the French Revolution? Does anybody know? I'll throw this out there. Take a guess. To seek refuge. To seek safety. Take a guess, Aiden.
Russia?
No. He came to the United States, northern Pennsylvania, right on the Susquehanna River. He came to Bradford County. True story. Okay, so let's go to read for information. The impact of the French Revolution. Let's read through it. Gracie, please.
When Washington's first administration had ended in 1793, a formation of two political groups had emerged: Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans and Hamilton Federalists. Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans supported states' rights and a smaller government. Hamilton Federalists supported a powerful federal government. The French Revolution started in 1789 and eventually involved many European countries. It began peacefully but entered a violent phase when France declared war on Austria in 1798. Things started to get worse when King Louis the
16th.
Was beheaded in 1793. The church was attacked and the federal reign of terror was begun.
Obviously, I put him in a very tough position, obviously. Okay, so April 22nd, 1793. Very important that we understand this quote. What did Washington mean when he declared the United States to be friendly and impartial toward both warring powers? Bryson.
He kind of wanted to stay neutral and kind of stay out of the war.
Like that word, neutral. Be neutral, yes. Read for information. Evelyn, please.
Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans aimed to support the French in the war against the British. The Federalists were opposed. Washington issued the Neutrality Proclamation in 1793, stating the country's neutrality from Britain transport. It was backed by Hamilton.
Describe the basis of Jay's Treaty. Did anybody get that far? Amy?
I have that Britain was allowed to seize cargoes going to French ports, and that Britain agreed to submitting the issue to international arbitration.
And that's a tough treaty to understand. I'm going to go over it. Maggie, you had your hand up. Anything to add? Okay, and we'll get to that too. The bottom line is it hurt our merchants. It hurt our economy. That's why many people thought it was a sellout to Britain. It actually hurt us. But Washington felt it was necessary to keep us out of the war. And that's what I want you to know. The one guy that's really going to keep us out of this war is actually going to be John Adams, who sometimes really gets a hard time as one of the worst presidents ever. But I'm going to ask you to rethink that when we get to it. Okay, go to page 6 at the top. Summary, Jay's Treaty and Washington's farewell. Let's take a look. Evelyn, please.
In the last attempt to avoid war, President Washington sent Chief Justice John Jay to London in 1794 opposed by Democrats.
Bless you.
Jay hammered out Jay's Treaty, in which the British promised to evacuate the chain of boats on U.S. soil and pay for damages for the seizure of American ships. Britain did not agree to anything about future maritime seizures or about supplying arms to Indians. The treaty also called for the U.S. to continue to pay the debts owed to British nationals before the Revolutionary War announced.
It's very important to understand a couple things here. Now, I'm going to go over Jay's Treaty in detail, but look at that second to last sentence. And go ahead and underline that. Britain did not agree to anything about future maritime seizures or about supplying arms to Indians. That's going to be very important because that's what's going to lead to the War of 1812, and it wouldn't hurt to note that right there. Okay, so this is not going away. All right. Britain did not agree to that. Okay, so let's get to it. Up to the screen and have your notes ready to go. Washington's foreign policy. This is dealing with activities outside of the country. Foreign policy refers to outside the country. What was happening over in Europe? Once again, everybody? French Revolution. And keep in mind, this is pitting France against everybody, but the big deal there is Britain. Okay? Britain gets involved, and that's where the United States is concerned. How did U.S. citizens view the French Revolution? Well, it depends on which side you're on. Federalists support Britain, whereas the Republicans support France. Okay? Okay, so moving right along. Tensions were very high between all countries. As you can see there for yourself, Britain and France were at war, and Britain was seizing U.S. ships. I do want you to know that. They were actually seizing our ships, stopping our ships, and it was hurting our economy. That's the moral of the story. They were also impressing U.S. sailors. Now, I do want you to know what impressing means. What does impressing mean? That does not mean you get out of the weight room and you bench press 300 pounds. Maybe.
Like forcing them.
Yeah, they were actually kidnapping U.S. sailors and using them in their own military. That does not make Washington happy. Impressing means to kidnap soldiers and use them in the opposing army. Okay, take a minute on your own, look at the timeline there to try to put this all in sequence. Washington's reelected, France and England declare war, neutrality proclamation, Citizen Gannett arrives, I'll talk about that later. American vessels are seized, Madison proposes the anti-English laws, Jay's Treaty, Democratic-Republican society spread, and Pinckney's Treaty is signed. Okay, Washington wants to be neutral. Okay, and you need to know that. Washington says be neutral in all foreign affairs. Neutrality. And the answer to that question at the bottom, as you can take a look at that, how did the French Revolution help lead the establishment of political parties? The Republicans are supporting the French revolutionaries, really until the Reign of Terror, though, and Britain is supported by the Federalists, as we just went over. So this fuels the fire. And that brings us to a very important treaty that I want you to know, Jay's Treaty. Jay's Treaty can be a little tricky to understand. It's not as easy to understand as Pinckney's Treaty or the Treaty of Grenville. I'm not too worried you write all that down, but just understand it was named for the Chief Justice, John Jay. We'll get to that. I'll talk more about him later. But that's why it's called that instead of Washington's Treaty or Hamilton's Treaty. Okay, so here we go. And again, stay with me here. I realize this can be a little tough to understand. Jay's Treaty was between Britain and the U.S. We know that. Okay, let's read through the introduction part there. Maggie, please.
In 1794, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court John Jay was dispatched to England to seek solutions and talk Britain out of the offensive practice of searching and seizing American ships and impressing U.S. soldiers. Britain would pull its troops out of the western frontier to 2, Britain would not compensate the U.S. for previous attacks on U.S. shippers and merchants. 3, U.S. is given most favored nation status by Britain, meaning they will not attack our ships and oppress our soldiers.
Okay, so you want to know 1, 2, and 3. Now, don't write down complete sentences, but just understand. Britain's pulling its troops out of the West. That's all you need to write down. Don't write everything down. Save your hand. Britain would not compensate the U.S. for previous attacks on the U.S. In other words, they wouldn't pay for damages, okay? Britain would not pay for damages. But the number 3 is very critical. Make sure you understand that. The U.S. is given most favored nation status, meaning they will not attack our ships and oppress our soldiers. Many people thought this was a sellout to Britain, and that's what I want you to understand. It's like, okay, let bygones be bygones. Jefferson was furious over this. So was Madison. And I want you to understand that. This was really divisive. Okay? Jay's Treaty. Britain pulls its troops out. Britain will not pay for damages. And number 3 is critical. Britain gets most favored nation status. They will not attack or impress our soldiers. Look at that last part. Very important that we understand that. The last 4 lines there. Okay, let's read through that. Jesse.
The resulting agreement stirred up heated passions within the cabinet, with Hamilton supporting the agreement and Jefferson opposing it. Most importantly, it avoided a war with England.
If you talk to Washington, he'll tell you this was necessary because it did avoid a war with England. And that was very important because if we would have gone to war then after the Revolution, we would have been in serious trouble, and Washington knew that. Jefferson says, okay, we don't need to go to war, but we don't let Britain off the hook either. Okay? This was hotly contested. Furious. I mean, people were furious over this. Georgia, will you read through this, please?
The treaty was hotly contested by the Jeffersonians in each state. They feared that closer economic ties with Britain would strengthen Hamilton's Federalist Party and promote aristocracy. Washington's announced support proved decisive, and the treaty was ratified by a 2/3 majority of the Senate in November 1794. The treaty became a central issue of contention, leading to the formation of the first party system, with the Federalists favoring Britain and the Jeffersonian Republicans favoring France.
Okay. Moving on then. Everybody understand Jay's Treaty somewhat anyway? Okay, let's take a look at this. Pinckney's Treaty. Pinckney's Treaty is named for a congressman. I'm not too worried about that. But it was a deal with Spain. This one's a lot easier to understand. Okay? This one's a lot easier. Pinckney's Treaty gave the U.S. the right to use what river? Anybody want to figure it out? I'll give you a hint. There's only one of there. Evelyn.
The Mississippi.
Why was it important? To whom was it most important? Okay, go into Canvas there and watch the video on Pinckney's Treaty. And while you're watching this, think how important the Mississippi River is. It's the longest river in our country. By far, it's huge. New Orleans is what's critical about it as well. Okay, so Pinckney's Treaty, I think we get the idea, gave the U.S. the right to use what river, everybody? Why was this important and to whom was it most important? Let's do the first part. Why was this important? Go ahead.
It was like the trade highway.
The trade highway, yes. And to whom was it most important? What do you think, Maggie? Say again?
Farmers.
Farmers, yeah, the United States by far. It was, you could say, important for Spain because we didn't have to go to war over it. But it was definitely important to the farmers, yes, merchants as well. Mostly the farmers, I agree. The catch here is this was a brilliant treaty for the United States, and that's what I want you to know. This was most important for the United States, and let's go one step further, and I want you to understand it this way. Washington looks like a hero. Look at what he's able to accomplish without firing one weapon. Okay? There is no war here. There's no treaty. This treaty did not result from a war, and that's what I want you to understand. Washington looks great. Okay? Washington looks great. Another reason why a lot call him the greatest president. Arguable. Okay? Arguable. All right, let's move on then. Let's take a look at the Treaty of Greenville. In many cases, in some cases, I should point out, this is spelled without the second E and it's pronounced Grenville. Now remember, this is before Webster writes his dictionary and there is no standard language. But let's read through this. The Treaty of Greenville or Grenville. Aiden, please.
The Treaty of Greenville, August 3rd, 1795, at Fort Greenville, after the Battle of Fallen Timbers. The parties in the treaty were a coalition of Native American tribes and the United States government. The treaty established what became known as the Greenville Treaty Line, which was for several years a boundary between Native American territory and lands open to European American settlers. The latter frequently disregarded the treaty line as they continued to encroach on Native American land. The treaty also established the annuity system, yearly grants of federal money and supplies of calico cloth to Native American tribes, and thus institutionalized continuing government influence in tribal affairs, giving outsiders considerable control over Native American land.
Now it's very important that we tie this in and remember the Northwest Ordinance, which established Ohio as what's going to become a state. Now, if you look at the map and you see where this was, the bottom line is this is a peace treaty with Native Americans. And what it was, make sure you throw in a dollar sign there. The United States would pay Native Americans for this land, okay? And that's annuity. Annuity refers to yearly. So what the United States is doing is basically renting the land from the Native Americans and also providing Native Americans with supplies. That said, I want you to understand this does not last forever. And what's that nasty word for Native Americans when settlers move into their territory? Amy? Encroachment. So I want you to understand it did not last forever. Okay, but it was a peace treaty with Native Americans. Again, it makes Washington look good, although it's not going to last. Okay? Okay, moving right along then. Washington's farewell. We're going to get to the end of his presidency. Obviously, that was 1795. He's out of office in 98. Washington grew very weary of politics and he started to reject publicity. After 2 terms as president, he decides to step down. He could have run again. At this time, there were no term limits. Who's the only president elected to 4 terms? Anybody know? FDR. In 1950, with the 25th Amendment, that changed, and now presidents can only serve 2 full terms. Here's a trivia question for you. How many years can a president serve? It's a trick question. Caleb. It is 10. Very good. It's not 8, because you can fill in the term of a president for up to 2 years and then be elected to 2 more. Okay? Okay. Washington has several mornings when he left office, and of course, I referred to this before. Okay? Give me a volunteer to run back here real quick. Or two. Hurry up, somebody stand up. Come on back. Somebody else. Come on. We got 10 minutes. Hurry up. Everybody grab a book. Go to page 1068. Hurry up. Now, real quick, go to your handout. And I just want to show you this. Let's see what page is it. 9C. 9C. This is Washington's farewell address. We're going to read the one on 1068 and make it easier. Go to page 9C. You see that? That's the actual full version. In your handout, 9C. You see that? Huge. For the sake of 9 minutes left in class, we'll read the one on page 1068. Okay? Jesse, go real fast like a rabbit.
Washington's farewell address. Washington never orally delivered his farewell
I
address.
do want you to be aware of that, by the way. He never did it orally. It was published in the newspaper. Okay, go ahead.
Instead, he arranged to have it printed in the Philadelphia newspaper on September 19, 1796, designed in part to remove him from consideration for a third presidential term. The address also warned about dangers that the new nation was facing, especially the dangers of political parties and sectionalism. Friends and fellow citizens, the period for new election of a citizen to administer the executive government of the United States being not far distant. I should now apprise you of the resolution I have formed to decline being considered. The unity of government, which constitutes you one people, is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity in every shape, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. But as it is easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth.
Evelyn.
The name of American which belongs to you in your national capacity must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. In contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western, whence designing men may endeavor to cite a belief that there is a real difference of local interests and views. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the sphere of party generally. The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the sphere of revenge natural to party dissension, is itself a frightful despotism.
Pause. What does faction mean? I'd ask. Say again? Political parties, different opinions, different beliefs. Yes, good. Go ahead.
Of all the dispositions and habits which led to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. The volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, the sense of religious obligation to desert the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reading and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little possible connection as possible. In offering you, my countrymen, these counsels of an open, affectionate friend, I dare not hope that they will make the strong and lasting impression I could wish, but if I may even flatter myself that they may be productive of some partial benefit.
Take a look up the screen. The 3 warnings will make it real simple for you. Political parties, entangling alliances, meaning foreign affairs. Make sure you add foreign affairs there. Should have foreign affairs. And sectionalism. Sectionalism. And I'm going to ask you once again, how do we do with these 3 warnings? I saw 1 thumbs up. I take it that's a sarcastic thumbs up. I would think. It's 3 warnings: political parties, entangling alliances, and sectionalism. Again, for entangling alliances, he didn't say we can't get involved in foreign affairs, but he said basically don't get over involved in foreign affairs. How do we do?
Great.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrific.
Couldn't have gone better.
Okay, moving on then. Summary. Take a look at the screen there. Go, Amy, go.
As always, Washington was extremely sensitive to the importance of public appearance, and he used his departure to publicize a major farewell statement of his political philosophy. Washington's farewell address has long been recognized as a towering statement of American political purpose and has been read annually in the U.S. Congress as part of the national recognition of the first president's birthday for over 100 years.
Okay, and there's the address. That's the actual document. Maggie, comment.
What?
We do.
I was just kind of thinking that if they read it every year on his birthday, then do they like fall asleep when they read it? Because they haven't really listened to it.
Good point. Good question. Farewell address. It was published in the newspaper. And of course, John Adams is coming next. Adams is inheriting one heck of a mess. Okay, Britain and France are at war. The United States has tended or wants to get involved. Okay, so Adams is dealing with one major issue after another. Okay, the first president, Washington was a slave owner. I do want you to know that he was a slave owner, and when he died, he wanted his slaves to be released, and they were. Obviously, you can interpret that however you wish. His body was first buried in that old vault, as you can see, and then it was moved later on. Well, by the way, he died 2 years after being in office. Well, not even quite 2 years. Okay? And then he was buried here. Why they moved his body, I don't know. 32 years later, there probably wasn't much left. You see that little door back there? That's so the spirits can come from the afterlife back to the future. That's why they put that in there. If you believe that, I'll sell you a used car. Okay, but there you can see that's where his body is entombed. Okay, slavery, and you can see Aiden B. Washington.
It is my will and desire that all the slaves which I hold in my own right shall receive their freedom.
Stop moving around. We're here till 2:35. Relax. Go ahead.
Of the 316 slaves at Mount Vernon in 1799, most lived and worked on 4 outlying farms. About
Go.
one.
Go to your handout there. Real quick. Okay, thank you, Aiden. I cut you off there, but we got the idea, okay? Go to page 16, it'll be actually. Go ahead and turn the other light on. It's not actually numbered. I think, well, it is actually. Review outline. If you want to start studying 16, 17, 18 are great reviews. Okay? And go to that last page there where I did give you the review, correct? It's in there.
22. 21, 22.
The one that has exam review at the top.
Yeah.
Okay. Stay with me. Go down to 6 at the bottom. Everybody see it? Exam review. What page do I have that number?
21 and 22.
Okay, go to 21 then. Go to 6 at the bottom. The theories of interposition, nullification. I'm asking you, just stay here a minute. State or federal government, okay? Is it state or federal? I'll talk about that Monday. 7. What were the 4 cabinet positions? What were the 4 cabinet positions? Number 8. I'm asking you, what did it do? What did it mean for the federal government? What did it mean for the federal government? Please adjust that, okay? What did it mean for the federal government? Okay, a couple more yet. I want to give this to you in case you want to study over the weekend. 9, the next page.
May I have your attention,
9.
please? Mrs. Furion's class report to the cafeteria.
I'll tell you what, just go to class. I will post this on Canvas and then you can have the information, okay? Rather than keep you from second period. Just go ahead and go. Have a great weekend. And Monday we'll hit Adams.
Books here.
Test is, let the books on your desk. Test is scheduled for Tuesday, okay? Test Tuesday. We'll talk more on Monday, but you can get a jump on studying. Let the textbooks on your desk.
Have a good weekend.
You too.